Welcome to the BWI Live Show. It is finally, officially, there is no doubt about it. It is on the schedule. It's game week. I got to admit, I was a little too hyped before the show. I had to do some deep breaths. I had to do some calming exercises. I had way too much coffee. I listened to way too much lifting music before we got on here. I was at an 11. I am now down to an 8, so we can do the show. Welcome to our experts here who are going to talk to you about Penn State football. How this is going to go during the regular season. A little bit here, different to start the show because normally at this point we would be talking about the previous game, recapping Penn State's latest opponent, but because there is no previous opponent, you get 3 straight days of Penn State, West Virginia preview here on the BWI Live Show, including the recruiting show coming up on Thursday where Fitz and Ryan will give some of their thoughts as we get right up, butting up against the game. But I'm done talking. Ryan Snyder, Nate Bauer here, Sean Fitz, I apologize, and Nate Bauer here on the show today. I told you, I'm all the way up here. I'm just flying around. Fitz, how you doing today?
You snorting pre-workout or something this morning.
Yeah,
You're all about this. Nate and I coming in at a lofty 6.5 as usual. Nate's a little I think higher than that right now, but no, it's exciting. It's game week. It's gonna be a good time. We're excited for Morgantown.
Now, full disclosure here, Nate, I don't always like talking about your business on the air. I don't mean to do that, but it does affect the show today. Nate is coming in off the injury report. He's still playing, but there were some pre-show things that happened. So set everything up for everyone to let them know what your morning was like so far.
Sure. So, at 8 o'clock, I got the 1-hour text heads up reminding me of my dentist appointment this morning. And so within that dentist appointment, I had a cavity fill, which is horribly embarrassing. I mean, I'm an adult. Adults shouldn't get cavities, right? Yeah, I mean, how hard is this? But alas, I had a cavity fill ago, and here we are. This has to count for something. Like, that's all I'm just saying. Fitz, T. Frank, I want people to acknowledge what I've been through. That's it.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We're also working through a little bit of technical difficulties, I think, on your end, Nate. As always, like the State College Wi-Fi going to get you this early in the morning. But we got Mech Engineer who is ready to go like the rest of us. He's in mid-season form. Always appreciate the donation to the channel. The BWI Mailbag coming up at the end of the show. But if you're going to donate $10, like I got to respect that. So we're going to get right into it, Fitz. He wants to know, situation with Caden Saunders, some bumps and bruises, I think is what James Franklin said yesterday. So if Saunders is available, if he's not available, they said they hope to have him. What do you know about that particular situation with punt return, and what can you tell people here to kick off the show?
Yeah, I know Mech Engineers on the site of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, so we've talked about this a little bit behind the scenes. Caden Saunders has been banged up for a couple of weeks now. They hope to have him back this week. But even then, you think, you've been out for a couple of weeks. You go without, especially catching punts, which is a tough thing to do. How quickly can you assimilate him back in? Because he had the lead basically by a mile coming into camp for that punt return job. I mean, Justin Lustig didn't even leave that up to question when he was talking during media day, that it was Saunders' job. And there's a couple other guys going after it. Anthony Ivey, Quentin Martin. I think Tysier Denmark was even kicked around. This is an interesting one to me because I've checked in on a couple of times in the last week, and not much clarity on that on that side. Like Penn State has, I don't want to say is worried about it, but this is one of the things that going into the week, like this is the thing that they're not secure on. And punt return is pretty important, especially when you go on the road into an atmosphere like Morgantown. So I don't know the answer to that. I think it's going to be a safety route on Penn State's front, and I think that's the right way to go. I do think, and I've said this a couple of times, I think West Virginia is going to fake a punt at some point. So keep your defense out there. Maybe put Winston back. Maybe put Reed back. Somebody like that. Somebody that can catch the ball, secure it, get the fair catch, and go with it. So that's going to be an interesting thing. And again, if you're following along on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, not a surprise to hear that Caden Saunders has been bumped up, but they're hopeful to have him back at some point. It's going to depend on his health and how things go. Because like I said, he was the guy, and it wasn't questioned at that point. So we will very much play a wait and see game on that one, because I don't think Penn State's very secure with where they stand at punt return right now.
So we'll be monitoring that all week here at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And by the way, you've got to know this particular information. We have a special deal, the best deal that we're going to have this year that I know of at this point, the best deal we've had so far, 50% off at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Promo code Kickoff24 if you're watching here on the YouTube channel. If you're listening on the podcast, promo code Kickoff24. You get 50% off an annual membership. So sign up right now, and you get 365 days of the best coverage from Penn State football. We also have a premium podcast where we talk about some of the things we don't talk about here on the show. And I just got to say, Nate, Fitz, they've been doing an awesome job during training camp. That hasn't stopped of getting some of that insight and information. So if you want that news, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm going to put it up here one more time. Kickoff 24 to kick off the season. It's not just me that is excited. On 3, Blue White Illustrated, we're all excited to get you on the site and get all that great information about Penn State football so that you are the smartest person at your tailgate, your party at your house, or if you're just sitting outside Morgantown, outside the stadium on a couch hanging out because the tickets to the game are crazy this week. However you're watching the game, however you're hanging out, Blue White Illustrated is going to help you be the smartest guy or girl or person or dog or gerbil or whatever of your Penn State football fans. So appreciate everybody who signed up already.
Yeah, and it was a big response yesterday for the first day of the sale. I think today's the last day, so get on that when you can.
Yes.
And T. Frank, guess what? We're not going for the low-hanging couch joke, so it's not happening. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just, again, like I said, we're going 1,000 miles an hour in my brain. What comes out, it's not entirely up to me at this point. But I know one place that you guys like to hang out is Anti-Fragile Fits.
Yes. A couple weeks ago, I tweeted that out. I was down there. My dad came into town. Everybody that comes to the tailgate knows Bill Fitz, and he likes a good cheesesteak. He said, "Hey, I need one of those cheesesteaks from John's out front." I said, "Okay, we can do that." And he's not a drinker. He's not a beer guy, but we had a couple beers and we had a couple cheesesteaks, and he was quite pleased. So if it gets Bill Fitz's stamp of approval, I mean, that's good enough for basically anyone, I would say. But Anti-Fragile downtown, Calder Way, it is the spot to hang out, especially if you were in the adult nature like us. I turned 40 at the end of the week, so like that's kind of my spot. That's kind of the sweet spot for Anti-Fragile. Join us, Nate. I know you went last Friday, hung out, got a cheesesteak yourself after playing a little golf. So I mean, it's your spot as well. So great to have you on board. It was something that started in April 2022. State College's best beer. I can't say enough about it. Like I said, I'm going from the heart off the head here because I firmly believe in this place. I think it's a great spot to hang out, great spot to chill, great spot to get a seat, go upstairs, sit on the couch, lounge, do whatever you got to do with your friends. It is a wonderful spot. We're happy to have them on board for as a sponsor for this entire season because we believe in it, because they believe in us, and really appreciate the support they give us, and hope to reciprocate that support as well with the best beer in State College.
Yeah, appreciate them joining the show here today. Let's get into one of my favorite segments because we have great experts here that understand what's going on, what's being said, and that is Between the Lines, Penn State football, James Franklin, what he has to say and what he's actually saying when he says it.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
So yesterday, James Franklin spoke for about 40 minutes. You can watch the full thing at Blue White Illustrated's YouTube channel here. But we're going to talk about some of the interesting things that stood out to us that James Franklin said yesterday. I have 3 clips that I want to talk about, but before we start and get into those things, I wanted to see what you guys thought was interesting. Nate, you are our James Franklin interpreter, James Franklin whisperer. So what did he say that you thought was underrated that has significance this week that nobody's really talking about?
I thought that the receivers took quite a bit of precedence yesterday, and the one question that he responded about Anthony Ivy, Mekhi Flowers, and Tyler Johnson with a little, what do we call it? Like a little late push for Tysier Denmark, I thought was significant in the sense of, hey, nobody's going to expect these guys Well, first of all, I thought it was significant in a lot of ways. One, no one should expect them to be top of the rotation at the beginning of the season, but the way he described how you need to continue to pour all of your resources into them through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year so that they can contribute in the back half of the season, I thought was telling. In the sense of, one, there's probably a little bit of discomfort at how deep they are there in terms of ready to play guys that they have right now at receiver. And then additionally, kind of the acknowledgement of what actually happens during a college football season. There's only so many reps to go around. And when guys are relegated to the scout team, they don't have that opportunity. They don't get the same level of attention from position coaches because it's not there to give. And so him basically signaling, hey, these are guys that have flashed enough to draw their attention and as a coaching staff, and that needs to remain the case because that position needs it. That position needs their support.
Yeah, Fitz, the way he phrased that and the way that Nate broke that out in terms of being ready by game 4, game 5, kind of said they were close at receiver. How does that make you feel about week 1 and the depth and availability there? Do you think that that's a nuance to pick up on, or is that just like they'll be ready, they'll have enough receivers?
Yeah, I think they're okay for week 1 in terms of what the game plan would manifest. Really, you look at the guys that they have at the top of the depth chart, and that's anytime you go on the road, you tighten up anyway, tighten up rotations and things like that. So I think that'll be fine. So you're looking at 4 receivers right now. And then you look at the personnel packages. Do you run, with 2 tight ends? Do you go with 2 running backs? How do you not get fewer receivers on the field, but how do you make your offense, a little bit more versatile by going with those different packages? So that's kind of what I'm looking at, focusing on 5 and 6 and 7, even 8. I think Franklin has mentioned, did he mention 8 receivers yesterday, 7 or 8 receivers yesterday? It's kind of irrelevant at this point because you tighten up as you get into the meat of the season, especially, for an atmosphere like should be on Saturday and, and it's Tuesday. So I don't want to bring this into it yet, but weather, if that's a factor, do you get close to football? So I think that's really what I'm looking at with those receivers. With guys like Johnson and Ivy, I think you're just seeing a little bit more flashing right now. And the consistency is the aspect that they've really been hammering home with those guys. And I don't think they're there yet. 5 or 6 seems for a game 5 or 6 seems optimistic, but at some point you're going to need some guys to run some routes. You're going to send somebody deep and all of a sudden have to fill that spot. So like that's what I'm looking for with those guys. Can you just, plug them in there for a couple of snaps and see if they can fit? Like it was really, I thought it was interesting listening to the ins and outs of that answer. Is like, there's clearly separation between the top and the bottom here. Like there's, hey, these guys have made strides. They're not ready to play yet, but they've made strides. And Franklin all but admitted that they weren't ready to be a part of a regular rotation. So I'm thinking 4 guys on Saturday. I'm thinking, a couple of tight ends, a couple of running backs. Sometimes Nate, you're all on board with the Nick Singleton going to catch some passes this week and beyond. So I think that adding that aspect into it sort of downplays what you're looking for at a receiver, because if they start in 11 personnel, you've got Trey, you've got Liam, and probably Julian Fleming. But you're trying to carve out that role. And I think James said it again yesterday. It's like, hey, we're happy we got Julian Fleming, but also he's been, what did he say? Good, solid. What did he use this week? It's part of that. Part of that entire off-season thing that we've kind of been pushing here, that he can have a role. It's not necessarily the role that people thought it was going to be when he came over from Ohio State.
I think it's also meaningful that he mentioned 11 personnel, because there is this off-season narrative, and one of the things that I've been trying to, I guess, emphasize of, let's not go all in, full steam ahead on 12 personnel, and this team is going to be running 2 tight ends 99% of the time. Even teams that run a lot of 2 tight ends, they run 3 receiver personnel 40-ish% of the time, 45% of the time. You need to have that package as a viable option in your offense. So as much as you can de-emphasize the receivers, you absolutely still need to be able to put 3 receivers out there to be able to stretch the field, throw the football, eliminate some of the issues they had last year, which was just a very cramped tackle box where there was not a lot of room to run. Nate, anything you want to finish up on? Because there was a couple things that Fitz said that I thought was interesting. I didn't know if you wanted to reply to on those after I've gone on my rant.
I think he's delayed a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, I think he certainly is.
Hey, I do have something, T. Frank, here
Yeah.
to build on my own point that I spent a minute and a half making. How much blending is there between Tyler Warren and Julian Fleming for what Penn State's looking to get out? Because he mentioned yesterday, Julian's physical blocker. He's always been a physical blocker. You know, you kind of toe that line. You know, Julian's not an H-back, but you kind of toe that line between those two. So I'm very curious to see what the personnel says about those two.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially if you're going to use condensed formations, if you're going to bring the receivers closer to the line of scrimmage so you can bounce some runs and get the running backs on the outside. We saw them try to do that in 2022. Keandre Lambert-Smith was one of those guys. A bit of a difference between Lambert-Smith and Julian Fleming physically. But the best run-blocking wide receiver, no disrespect to Steelers fans, is not nearly as good of a blocker as a tight end. And the fastest tight end is a slow receiver. So there is a blend of the two, but you need to have that balance of threats inside, outside, because you can't just have there is a very similar zone busting, getting open underneath, maybe some contested catches. They bring a similar element to the field at the same time. So that is something I've been focusing on in terms of the positional skills that you have out there, and why a guy like Omari Evans, as Nate has been kind of stumping for this offseason, why he's so important to that lineup out there. Nate, do we have you back?
I'm back.
Okay, great. Any thoughts?
No.
Okay, great. I want to play this next clip then. This is from James Franklin. This is something you're going to have thoughts about because we've talked about it for about 2 years here on the show, and that is Pat Kraft being a part of Penn State for the extended future. Want to get into that conversation about Pat Kraft's contract extension, but through the lens of what James Franklin had to say of some of the biggest accomplishments that they've had recently in terms of the last 11 years of growth from the organization under him as the head coach.
As you guys know, this was stated early on, facility-wise. I didn't think, we were in a great place. There was some resistance to that early on. But we've been able to get all that done, and thank God, because if you didn't get it done before now, you're not going to do it moving forward. The other thing I would say that's kind of more recent is our training table that we have this year, our football-specific training table that we have. I think we're probably the only top 10 program maybe in the country that did not have a football training table. This is our first year for having it. One that's in the facility and part of the football building. I think that's been a huge win for us.
Nate, have at it. Which part of that do you want to start with? Because I think that those are two interesting and illuminating points as far as Penn State's work with Pat Kraft over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think, look, to be fair, it wasn't just Pat Kraft. Sandy Barber initiated, many of the things that have happened with the Lash building and, specifically the Lash building, obviously, right? They did the team auditorium, they did the locker room, they did the training, the team physician area. And they did the team meeting rooms, right? All of those things happened on the first floor over the last, 6-7 years. Now they are getting into the second floor. The second floor is done, and the coaches are back up there. And so the building itself has been transformed. But I think his point and the word that he used was resistance, and it's the elephant in the room, right? is you had this entire cultural mindset at Penn State of, what they have is good enough, and stop wanting more, right? This was pervasive. This was, not necessarily just the athletic director's chair who was pushing back. It was also the board of trustees didn't want to do it. There was a lot of just, again, resistance. They didn't want to do these things. And so, kicking and screaming, they finally were able to get a lot of these things done. And now that they are done or in the process of being done, right? The training table that he talked about as being a big difference this year, it's not done. It's not done. Like that's a
That's
fall,
an important point.
yeah, that's a fall 2025 project. And then that was understood, right? When that was approved, I believe it was last spring, not this past spring, but 2 springs ago was when that project got approved, with 6 other facilities projects that included the practice bubble for soccer. But it's, again, and we've talked about this here, people see some of this spending as non-football, but it isn't. Like it is football spending. The indoor training facility to allow soccer and field hockey and all of the other sports that utilize Haluba Hall through the course of the year, that's for football. That's to get them out of football's facility so that football can exclusively use its indoor complex. So yeah, I think James Franklin overall is extremely appreciative of Pat Kraft's perception of how things work, which is to say, with football and its rising boat, the other boats come with it, as opposed to, hey, football is the endeavor that supports what is otherwise equally worthy with 30 other sports, which I think opens the door to disagreement, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people just, that might work at Shippensburg.
Hey,
Fitz.
What? I like Shippensburg. It's a great place.
yeah. My
The
sister's the
training
trainer for a
table
football team there.
thing.
So that's just so random. So
Okay, Westchester,
thank you.
East Stroudsburg,
Edinburgh?
Edinburgh. Sure.
The training table thing, I think, still surprises me in terms of resources available and some of the things behind the scenes. It's something he said yesterday, and something that I think people don't really understand is how hard it is to maintain weight, especially if you're a larger athlete, offensive lineman, defensive lineman. The amount of exertion and running you have to do during a season, and the amount of caloric intake you need to maintain your size and mass. Guys lose weight over the season, which is why they try to get as big as possible before the season. So Fitz, like, how much of do you think there's a subtle difference there in staying power with a longer season if they do have this training table? Is it something that we might not notice, but it can have an impact directly on what happens on the field?
It can have an impact. I think it's more based on the ease of access and how that affects everything else. You spend less time going to the dining hall, you spend more time watching film. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think they're trying to streamline and keeping it close there at Greenberg and keeping it sort of essentially in-house. I think that's what they're going for. You look at how guys lose weight all the time. And you mentioned, over the course of a season, they do that over the course of a day. Like they do pre-practice weigh-ins, post-practice weigh-ins. Like Andrew Nelson is there for a reason to monitor all this stuff, and just having it there, having the ease of it there, really takes a lot of it off. So I think that's you're probably looking for a big answer, but like it's kind of right there in front of your face. It's like make it easier on everyone, and everything else. You spend less time walking to the dining hall, you spend more time in the gym or doing whatever. So I think that's the easy answer right there.
Yeah, I was thinking about Carl Nassib yesterday. And if you remember back in 2015 or 2016, whatever, I think it was 2015, he was telling a story of like, how did you gain 70 pounds over the last couple of years? And he said, well, I ate a lot of chicken and rice from Chipotle. Chicken and rice from Chipotle is different than having a chef making you food inside the training facility. Like these are 18-year-old young men having to make those choices on their own. The less barriers you put between them and the right choice, the more often they're going to make those choices. As much as these are now semi-professional athletes, they are not professional athletes. They are college students going to college. So there are decisions and there are things that you need to make. And even in the NFL, guys don't always follow what you would say is like the right decision-making process for treating their bodies. Now, those guys end up being freaks because they're in the NFL and they can just do it anyway and be great at football. But reducing these inefficiencies and creating this environment is massive for the on the field results. It doesn't mean they're going to win more games, but it means that maybe they'll have more healthy guys at the end of the season. Guys have more juice at the end of the season. Whatever it is, I think it is a massive win and something that's been understated this whole time in the process Penn State football has been doing, competing with these other top schools. The last thing here, and again, go read about this in detail, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Kickoff 24 is the promo code for 50% off because Fitz wrote about this particular topic. We're just going to dabble into it a little bit. James Franklin talked about the green lights from the freshmen yesterday during his press conference.
So the two that are just decided right now is one on offense is Cooper Cousins will get green lighted, and on defense, DeJuan Lane will get green lighted. And some of that, the same thing I would tell the players, some of that is based on how they have conducted themselves, that we feel like they're ready. And some of that also is the position. Like there's other guys that I think if we needed to, we could green light and go, but maybe there's more depth at their position. Or is another guy that, is in the position because there's less depth at their position. Proven depth is, I guess, what I'm saying.
So these things that I don't think we're terribly surprised that Cooper Cousins is specifically a guy who's got a green light to start the year. Again, Fitz, I'm going to come back to you. DeJuan Lane is a guy we've been talking about and tracking at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So what has he done, and what's the context of the situation with him since he got to campus?
Well, you take a look at what Franklin said about the position aspect of things. And, there's some spots where Penn State's not particularly deep. I mean, their frontline first three safeties, and they're going to play a lot of three safety looks, are really good, I think. And then where do you go from there? And that's the big question. Were you looking at Lamont Payne, Colin Dinkins, Dakari Nelson moved to linebacker, which I think was inevitable. A couple other guys in that mix as well. But Lane is the guy that fits the mold, not only for a guy that can potentially play some safety. And I think there's a big gulf between 1 to 3 and 4 to 6 or whatever. But he's 6'2", 210, and he can run.
Yeah.
Throw him on special teams, man. Like that's where he's going to grow up for the most part. And then you're going to need him in 2025, I feel as well. So I think that's really that sort of, actually it's kind of the KJ Winston path, right? Like he had some guys in front of him, and, whether or not he plays a ton of on-field safety right now, that isn't mop-up time in September against the non-con. I don't think that's going to happen, but you got to get that guy ready. Again, King Mac's departure, very big this offseason, because he would have been a guy that played a lot and probably would have been the guy, when we opened talking about punt returns, that would be returning punts right now. So those are the little things that you're going in there. I don't see a situation where there's an answer to move a corner over to play safety or anything like that. What they're going to miss this year in that secondary, and I think the secondary is going to be really good. So it's kind of a silver lining here. But Daquan Hardy could have played 6 spots, five or six spots in that secondary. If you remember the Outback Bowl, he was practicing at safety because I think there was a couple guys sick. So that's the versatility there. You probably don't have that as much. You've got versatility with Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, of course, but finding a corner that can do everything like Hardy was able to do, I don't think you have that. So that's my long answer as to why DeJuan Lane is going to play on Saturday. And I think that those two are greenlit. We wrote yesterday about green, yellow, red. I expect a third freshman to play on Saturday as well. So it's going to be a situation probably not as heavy as it was last year, especially not as heavy as it was 2 years ago when 10 guys burned red shirts. But you're looking low single digits right now with red shirts as of August 27th.
Nate, that last point there from Fitz, I think, is also interesting to discuss the conversation about the depth of the team and how things have progressed over the last couple of years. Because if you're going to burn a lot of red shirts, it's because you need those guys. Penn State feels like a team that's pretty deep right now and has a lot of, potential for. I think there's a reason a lot of people are picking them as a college football playoff team. So I guess what are your thoughts on this particular conversation with the red shirts, the green lights, yellow light, whatever? What's your thought here? I don't have a question. Just go.
Yeah, I think that the program strategy has changed somewhat, right? It has evolved with the changing of roles to allow postseason participation, right? If like Drew Shelton is the most obvious example, but if rules that had been changed for him, if rules that had been changed since he burned his red shirt as a true freshman had been changed earlier, he would have been a redshirt freshman. He would have used a redshirt year as a true freshman, despite their situation, because they would have figured it out, right? For the 1 game difference, they would have figured that out. So I think it's a wait and see approach. And then I also think it's like, you're going to have a bunch of those freshmen max out the 4 games. That to me is relevant and significant. And then on top of those guys using those 4 games, I just think that you have a team that has a roster that is loaded with experience, like overwhelmingly. Like most of the there was a reason why a lot of those 2022 class guys forced their way into the mix. It's because they were more talented and very prepared at the beginning of their careers to play football, to do it, right? It was atypical how many guys they had that were in a position where they could provide that type of playing time. And so now that same group are juniors and seniors. And so they're in those spots where if you're a true freshman in this team, in this program right now, you've got to be extraordinarily talented to overtake those positions, right? Because let's be real, Quentin Martin would play 12 games if Nick Singleton and Katron Allen didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
If it would, like,
he would have been it just rewind a year, he would have played last year. I think like they were in need of a third running back, and there was some conversation about not playing. But I think the conversation about not playing 2 running backs at the same time, it spoke to the depth and the fact that London Montgomery was hurt and Cam Wallace was a freshman, and they kind of needed to develop that position. So I don't think they felt comfortable putting those 2 guys on the field for a significant portion of the playbook in case anything happened. Yeah. This year, like, the depth is better because you've got Cam Wallace as a redshirt freshman. So I want to spin the conversation forward to this upcoming game. And Nate, I do want to get your thoughts about what's coming up. We're going to do an early preview of the game. I'll be talking about things from the West Virginia perspective. I did some scouting on this team over the last couple of days. So that's coming up on Wednesday. Then, of course, Thursday, we'll have another game preview with Fitz and with Ryan. And Fitz, we can get your takes at any point. Like, we'll have your thoughts here and there. But Nate, I wanted to get your thoughts on the game. What do you think is important for Penn State in this particular matchup to determine the success for the Nittany Lions heading down on the road to West Virginia?
Run the ball and score touchdowns.
Okay. And where in the nexus of running the ball do you think that's going to land? We've got a question coming in the mailbag. We'll get a little bit into it, but is it going to be concussively run the football, or do you think they're going to be able to do that thing that we've been talking about all offseason, which is generate some explosive plays with those explosive running backs?
Yeah, both, right? Because I do think that last year Penn State struggled to create explosive plays in the running game against not good defenses, let alone the good defenses.
Yeah.
But also, and you can kill me for this, T. Frank, but like, I don't think I have no idea how Iowa's defense last season and West Virginia's defense this year compare, but I see a similarity in the sense of this is how you can win, is if like just player to player as the matchups go, Penn State has running backs that very much appear to me to be in a position to consistently pick up 5+ yards, right? Like I don't see West Virginia's defense eliminating that portion of Penn State's offense. And so as the passing game comes together and gets itself off the mat, right, and becomes alive as that process takes place, like you need that. And it's not like Drew Aller's not going to pass the ball, but with the weather conditions, with some of the situations that currently exist, when you put all of those together, I see a team and an offense that can, should, and will. And not to mention the fact that I think they're just going to run the heck out of the ball anyway this whole year. Like I really see this Penn State team and this offense being centered around those 2 running backs and an offensive line that I think they believe is suited to run the ball.
Yep. Fitz, I want to ask you this question. I apologize. For some reason, I cannot find it over here, but I'm looking on a secondary screen. 305 Mal donated to the channel, asked a question, wanted to get to it here in the show. What are some early indicators to look for in this game that will allow us to relax as Penn State fans? Conversely, what are the ones that will help us assume the fetal position?
Well, I don't know that it's like an early indicator, but you think back to even the last game Penn State played, the Peach Bowl. They ran the hell out of the ball early. Like they did. They opened it up like some Cotton Bowl type stuff. Like they did some really good things, and then boom, got away from it. I don't think Andy Kotelnicki's going to do that. And maybe that's hopeful. Maybe it's just, based on what, you kind of hear around there, but like stick with what works and go with it because you have the more talented team. Like that's kind of where I'm sitting with this whole thing, this whole experiment with Kotelnicki is like, how much is he going to stick with that? And how much is he going to help Drew to, because I think there's a spot where, yes, Drew's going to need some help, but if he gets the confidence behind him of everything else working and flowing, that's when you can really take off. And that's kind of what I see there. So, hit a couple runs early, hit some good things, maybe in the short passing game, shake some guys loose, get Trey Wallace going like that. That's what I'm looking at. Defensively, not particularly like nothing sticks out because I think Penn State's defensive line is going to be the dominant unit in this game. Like overall, like I think West Virginia has done some really nice things, recouping its offensive line after losing some great players there. But I still think the right side of that offensive line is going to be vulnerable. And I think Penn State's going to try and run that over, put some hits on Garrett Green. Like you don't want to come out and say, hurt the guy, but like they're going to put some hits on the quarterback. And that is their most dangerous weapon. That is their most dangerous player. So, offensively sticking with the run, defensively, just putting some hits on the quarterback and sort of get them scrambling and see if you can do that. Cause they've got some really good players. They've got some really good, situational guys. Like I think Penn State, I'm still curious to see how they flip the fortunes on the third down defense from last year, the third and long, especially with a running quarterback, especially with a team that will be able to run the football at some point. I don't know if it's going to be ultimately successful against Penn State's defensive line, but they're going to be able to run the ball at some point this season. So they've got some pieces in place to make that work. And then you go from there and don't coach yourself into a tight game, I guess is the way that I would go about that.
This one from Stephen Light, want to make sure I get to this because a new feature this year with our software is that after a while it deletes the chat, so that's why I couldn't find that. So if you do want to get a question on the air, that saves all of our super chats. And Stephen Light says, here's another great season of coverage from the BWI team. Always appreciate you. I love this, by the way, that we got some regulars in the chat that are saying hi to each other. Michael McCullen, the Beard Father, he's here. Stephen Light, also a regular here. Everyone's back together. The gang is here for the season. Nate, what Fitz just said, don't coach yourself into a close game. What are some of the things that could lead to that from that particular viewpoint in your estimation?
How they could coach themselves into a close game?
Yeah. Like what are the game flow situations in your mind, or what are some of the things that could, I'm not asking for game day coaching advice from you, but like what are the things that you've seen that you think, historically leads to those close games?
Historically leads to those close games. I think that Penn State could, for as much hype and as high as the expectations are for Penn State secondary and defense, I think that big plays could become a thing. It only takes a couple, I guess is what I'm saying. And so if Garrett Green is as elusive in the pocket as he seems to be and is a guy that they have trouble getting their hands on, how confident is Penn State in its secondary to go 6 seconds, right? Whatever that timeline is, right? If they have to remain in coverage that long and their cohesiveness, right? Because you're talking about different pieces. You're talking about some new faces that are going to be back there that are going to get serious reps this weekend. And so I do think that defense, like again, I can't disassociate last year from this year until I see what this year looks like. And so it will eternally be in my head that Penn State needs to score 27 plus points. And I don't know if they can do that. I'm going to have to see. Like, I don't. Would you bet on it like today? I guess so, but it's not a guarantee to me. And so that threshold of what has to happen to the defense to allow the number of points that we're talking about is low, right? Like it doesn't. It only takes a few plays to get to that number, where in my mind it becomes questionable whether or not Penn State can get there. But yeah, I'm going to pick Penn State to win, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Do you want to give a prediction as we sit here?
No.
You're not going to be on one of the shows later this week. Perfect.
Nope.
All right. So enough of my questions, enough of my random shots into the air from the hip. Let's get to what people want to know from our experts in the BWI Mailbag. So I'm looking through the chat here just to make sure I didn't miss anything. JC Corrigan asked this question. Penn State has done best when their offense has an identity. Does this team have an offensive identity, or do you see this happening early in the season or not? We've talked about like teams having to learn who they're going to be. That fine line of who you want to be and who you are fits. So do you think this team coming in has a hammered out offensive identity that they can then grow instead of having to figure out what it is through the first month of the season?
Outside of, I think they're going to run the ball a lot. Not really. No, I'm still waiting to see how that works. Still waiting to see how a guy like Trey Wallace can ascend and, fulfill that potential that he does have. And basically, how do you connect last year's, go through the tight ends, go through the guys that you have closer to the football, and how can you expand that in the outside passing game? So no, I don't know the team's identity other than I think Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are going to see their carries go up.
With this question here from the Blue White Illustrated message board, as always, if you want to get your question on the message board from the message board to the show, you need to be on the message board. Subscribe. Kickoff deal. I'm mentioning it one more time because it ends today. So if you're watching this and it's on replay, I just want you to know the sale ends at, I think, midnight tonight. You can get 50% off on the Blue White Illustrated deal for a yearly membership. Promo code KICKOFF24. Okay, so Blackheart8541 says, trying to make this question short. Broadly speaking, when talking about the talent gap between Penn State and Indiana or Kansas with the new offensive and defensive coordinators, is it that significant where the coach or coordinator has so much more to work with at Penn State? This one, of course, here from our regular here, Blackheart. Nate, what are your thoughts on this conversation we've been having about, like, what's the difference between what they can do previously and what they can do at Penn State?
Yeah, I think the difference is, yes, top-end talent. I do think that those places had some top-end talent. It's the depth that's different.
Yeah, you talked to Tom Allen a little bit about this, right?
Yeah, I mean, the question was, have you ever had 5 defensive tackles of this caliber? And I mean, he didn't need a minute to think about it. He just, no, like, no, that is not a thing that historically in his career has been at his disposal. And so when you have that level of competition and, the cliches, throw them all in there, iron sharpens iron, and then a safety net, that changes things. That changes how you go about, what you're doing, the confidence that you have to have an approach. And really, I think for me, and I'm specifically talking about the defensive side of the ball, but I just think the idea of waves is going to be very prevalent this year, particularly on the defensive line. You have so many players there that Penn State should defensively be able to wear teams out. Right. I mean, I do, like, if you're looking at the bulk of the schedule, yeah, that's a position that Penn State should be in, just based on its depth, is that when other teams have hiccups and hurdles and guys go out due to injury, and yeah, Penn State will have some of that too. But I just think over the course of games within those 60 minutes, you're going to see plenty of instances where, by the time you've seen, Devon J. Thomas and Hakeem Beeman and Zane Durant, like they're going to get tired of that. It will eventually be too much.
Right. And it's something that Neil Brown even brought up during his press conference, saying it's going to be a hot day and they can go 4 deep. And I don't think he is maybe caught up on the Alonzo Ford news, but having 5 defensive tackles, as Nate said, having guys with that much depth is something that is on the radar of the opponent as well. So Fitz, what do you think of the question here?
Indiana has had 3 draft picks since 2020.
Thank you. I was going to look that up.
Kansas has had 4. Like, that's a big difference, because what Penn State have that combined last year, like that's like, I mean, I don't want to overplay that sort of like one-off type thing, but you have more talent here. You have more depth here. Tom Allen did not have Abdul Carter at Indiana. He had some very good players, and you can be a first round pick at those schools if you are a dude. And but the odds, the stats are in line with Penn State's got a ton more talent. From an NFL perspective, they got a ton more talent, and they've got a lot of more depth to work with. So that's what I keep going back to, is you haven't had this at your disposal as a play caller. Even Manny Diaz, draft picks at Miami, of course, but I don't think had the sustainability that Penn State had as a defense there. So I think that stuff does matter. I'm very curious to see how he makes it work. I'm very curious to see how Tom Allen feels it out as a guy that, hey, when you have that kind of talent, you can cobble it together and you can win. Absolutely. And I think he did a really good job certain years at Indiana with that. But like, if you can take that step onto the front foot and be aggressive with it, like Manny was when he got here, then you can put yourself in a different echelon. And that's kind of where we're looking at. And, we kind of say the same thing about Maryland every year. It's like, hey, they got a couple dudes, like some guys that will end up being NFL prospects. And, you think that the top of that level is sometimes, DJ Moore in the first round or something like that. But you've got guys that can be absolute NFL prospects, but you don't have it at every position. You don't have it at every year, essentially. So that's kind of the difference here. And good coaches will figure out what to do with it. And, you hope, especially in the offensive side of the ball, and there's that word again, hope, that Kotelnicki is going to be a guy that can maximize what they have, because they do have, I think there is talent here. Like, that's not, I don't think that's up for debate, even though we will debate it. There is talent here.
I actually wrote a little bit about Tom Allen. I think it was last week, and some of the changes might have been this week. I don't remember at this point, but talking about the differences in what he did at Indiana, what James Franklin said about wanting to use specific coverages at Penn State after what he saw from Manny Diaz, and some of the reasons why Tom Allen didn't use those previously. And he was open. We talked about this in the spring. We had this conversation of, they used to have a position on his roster called the Bull, where he was kind of it was like a Sam edge rusher hybrid who could drop into coverage, but it was a specific player. And he said, the athletes here can do that, so I don't need to specify one guy, because all of the edge rushers have the talent to do that. The defensive line, their athleticism up front, not just the depth of them, their athleticism. So some of the things he's already outlined of, I can do more than I had to do before. Sometimes on the flip side of that fits too, like having to be aggressive to get pressure so that you weren't giving up easy completions on third down. You have to make some decisions to go crazy at certain times that you've got Abdul Carter, you've got Dennis Sutton. You maybe don't have to do those things.
Yeah, you throw an extra number in there, and it makes all the difference. And that's eventually, at a place like Indiana, that's how you crack too. Like, you can't keep doing that kind of stuff. But you get home with 4, maybe 5 at Penn State. It makes coaches look better. Not than they are, right, but it's going to make coaches look better.
Yeah, more options are more options. I'm going to handle this one to start. You guys can chime in if you want. But Blackheart. Actually, this is from somebody different. I apologize. Does Andy Kotelnicki unleash the entire playbook at West Virginia? If he does, end of question. But if he doesn't, is it because he wants to A, hold things back for a 3-game stretch in the middle of the season, or B, because the players aren't ready to implement the entire playbook yet, and they'll have to first master the basics of the offense? This whole conversation about hiding a part of the playbook or there is a certain aspect of that. Like, there are certain teams who can get away with doing that when they play Hawaii and UConn, Connecticut State, and other teams to start the season if you don't actually have to play anybody. But the reality of it is, this is like saying, do you use 100% of your brain when you think? Like that whole conversation, what if you use 100% of your brain? You don't just dump the whole playbook on your team each week, because that's too many plays for one individual game. Game planning is what part of our playbook works best against this opponent based on what they do, their strengths, and our strengths. And then we pick X number of plays, however many number of plays it is that you feel comfortable with on your play sheet, and that's what you call during the game. And you can select from different portions of the playbook throughout the year, knowing that there's going to be a core of what you do in every game because that's what you're good at. So the question is a little bit misleading because that's not necessarily how it works. And to get to a more fine point, Penn State's going to need their best shot on offense to win this game, so they're not going to hold anything back. Like, we got to wait to use this against Bowling Green, or we have to wait to use this against Wisconsin later in the year, which was really what the question was, the Wisconsin, USC, Ohio State stretch. They've got to get through this game. So, Fitz, I guess, do you agree with that, or do you see it differently?
No, sorry. I was holding in a sneeze. It's something that I really don't buy into in terms of the I think it comes back to the hiding the playbook so Ohio State doesn't see what it is. And that's kind of debunked. Like it's what can you do, especially how can you maximize what you're going to do against your opponent this time? How do you play on the strengths that you may not know that you have yet until you get in that game? Like that's a big if right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then where do you go from that? And then you build, you add to it every week, and you don't necessarily, run every play every week, but you add the elements of what you do to make yourself a more complete offense. So this idea that you're not going to, yes, the whole playbook is not going to be on display, but that's not like holding back for Ohio State or anything like that. It's because you need to maximize what you do and take it a little bit at a time. I mean, this is not a finished product by any means on this offensive side of the ball or on the defensive side of the ball, but you take a little bit at a time, and that's where you get where you're going. I mean, Ohio State's going to do the same thing. Michigan's going to do the same. Michigan's going to really do the same thing this year because they're not, solidified at quarterback after McCarthy's gone. So like it's something natural. It's a natural progression in college football every year. And it's not a situation where you're like, hey, we're only showing half of it because we don't want Ohio State to see what we're doing.
This from JRRRRRR in the chat. He says, looks like thunderstorms all morning, scattered storms throughout the afternoon. I pray for no delays. I think that's also something that is, no pun intended, on the horizon for this game that could affect like schedules. We've seen what the delays can do in a game and equalize situations between two teams of just weird delays and things like that. So keep that in mind for the weekend coming up. This one, I just got to say this, Fitz, we've had this conversation before. We got him. We got Will Gamble. Will Gamble has been a participant here on social media and here on the show. He officially took the plunge and joined BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So I always want to appreciate new members here on the show. He says, do you think we'll see Allard chuck it deep against West Virginia? This is a serious question. Nate, do you think we'll see Allard chuck it deep? That's a serious question.
Oh, boy. Do I think if it's raining, I don't know. Maybe. Not a lot. I don't think. I just look, it's high percentage stuff, right? That's you want to get him cooking and feeling good and in a flow. And if those things are happening and the running backs create some easy points for them, then sure. Right. But at the beginning of the game or in the early tone setting portion, I don't think so. But we'll see.
Fitz?
Well, what do you guys think?
I think they take a shot or two. And I
Stop
think it's more about the West Virginia secondary, which is, if you're looking to sort of level down this defense, that's the spot you attack. And what's West Virginia going to do? They're going to do what everybody else does and try and load the box and take away the run, make Drew Aller beat you.
Yeah.
Does that mean they complete the ball downfield? I don't know. But you're going to have maybe the opportunity to slip one deep. It's interesting. They played their safeties off last year, and that's certainly something that kept them in front of them. But you find the right spots, you get them close enough to the line of scrimmage, and maybe take a shot. I don't think it's an issue to take a shot. Like, I don't think it's going to be a big part of the playbook to just push it downfield. Right. But you got to take it eventually, and it makes sense.
One of the things that especially in the Big 12 and what we saw last year, and I don't know if this is going to change because it's week one and there's always differences, but a big trend in football generally is to play a two high shell, a quarters defense where you've got two safeties that are 10 yards off the ball. But they're playing flat-footed, which means like they're itching to come downhill. So it's this world of trying to have it both ways of you're going to keep players deep, so if it's a throw, you've got those guys back. But what we saw last year is those guys met the running backs 2 yards down the field. So despite the fact that they were playing deep, they were ready to come downhill. And to me, that's Andy Kolonicki's bag. Make those guys make the wrong decision at the snap and then have them be in the wrong spot because of the offense and the way that you attack it, which leads to explosive plays and open plays in the secondary. And I don't know that this means depth of target, but just something that I noticed last year in some of the stats is the top 3 wide receivers for Kansas averaged over 16 yards a catch. So there is an element from at least this offense last year, which was run the ball and chuck it deep. Maybe that doesn't mean exactly throw it 20 yards down the field, but get explosive plays in the passing game. Another new member, B. Harrell. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining the show. How much should we read into Amari Evans not being mentioned in Franklin's press conference yesterday discussing wide receivers? We talked about it earlier. On a positive note, what's the ceiling for Anthony Ivy, Tyler Johnson, if one of them takes a leap this season? Nate, Franklin Whisperer, please answer the first part about Amari Evans. Do you think that was just talking about a different part of the depth chart, or do you think it was a meaningful omission?
I took note of it.
Okay.
I'm not currently aware of anything happening with him, but in my experience, I think James Franklin is pretty intentional about who he highlights and when he highlights them. And so, yes, I was reading into Amari Evans not being mentioned in his press conference yesterday.
Interesting.
And sorry, what's that?
I just said interesting. I was not expecting that, truthfully. I thought it was just a different conversation, but yeah, that's I guess
not like
you're not aware of
injury
anything.
or like
Right.
I don't think it's like a dramatic thing necessarily. I mean, certainly we could find out if that's the case, but no, look, these things change from week to week. I think that because it feels so short I think it feels short to us, the timeline from week to week, not recognizing how dramatically things can swing from practice to practice. Right. And so performance, like forget all of the other possibilities. I just think that it's, interesting, but at least, right. Because look, let's play this where it is, right. He omitted Caden Saunders when something happened to Caden Saunders, right? Like under virtually identical circumstances when Caden Saunders got a little banged up earlier in camp. And he talked in the tiers of the receivers of Trey Wallace and Liam Clifford. And then he talked about Julian Fleming and Amari Evans. And why didn't he bring up Caden Saunders? Because Caden Saunders was banged up.
Yeah.
Yesterday, he brought up Julian Fleming and right.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Fitz, that does it for all the questions we're going to get to here on the show. We're out of time, but I want to know from you, what's going on for you, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. What can fans read or what can they discuss with you on the message board? What's coming up?
Yes, now is the time to jump on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We've got our sale that's ending today. Like I said, a lot of people have jumped on board. I think they've been pleased with it. I had notes yesterday. I had green, yellow, red notes, which were more extensive than I was planning to go to, but we made that into like 1,500 words. And then I put notes up before the press conference, just some little things at the end of camp. It's fully on game week. We get access to practice tomorrow night, so certainly Amari Evans is going to be one we're looking for. There's a ton of stuff, guys. Check it out. Ride with us all season long. I think we've done a really good job in, restructuring that message board into what it's become now, which is a really, it's been a welcoming place. It's been a place where people like to talk football. So can't say enough about the staff and the work that they've done. I said it last week. They've been awesome just to work with and to fill in. Like I said, I had a step out last week and you guys just crushed it. So I think it's the most complete Penn State coverage anywhere. I think it's the best offseason coverage we've ever put together. Nate, this, and I can't say enough about the kickoff sale. Promo code kickoff 2024, promo code kickoff 24. Please join us, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
And we will have all kinds of great coverage from open practice tomorrow. You'll get observations from these guys on the message board. We'll write about it, all that stuff. And coming up before then, I'm going to do my best to give you a scouting preview of what I saw from West Virginia on film this past weekend. Defense, offense, what is interesting, what is not interesting, some trends that might happen. It's week 1, so we're throwing darts at the wind, but we'll do our best. Myself and Greg Pickle coming back tomorrow, 10 a.m. here on the BWI Live Show. Don't forget, when you're subscribing to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, it's also free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we love having the conversation with you here as well. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk to you then.